Coming back to the healing power of nature, I was yesterday versus today, two very different days for me. Yesterday, the day before, it was raining a lot, so I figured it was gonna be the same because the forecast was supposed to be the same. I wound up sitting inside and just like playing video games all day, and I felt like a piece of crap for it, right? I managed to force myself to get out for at least an hour before the sunset when the weather cleared up, and I did a little bit of reading at this awesome park nearby. And I did the same thing again today, except I made sure to get out of the house a lot more, and at least like go work out at the gym and just kind of just be outdoors, do a quick bit of grocery shopping, whatever. And just the change in that mental state is humongous. Not even just like in nature, just get outside of your freaking house, because that can have a huge impact on your mental state. But a couple of things that while you guys were talking, I was kind of pondering and thinking about, as well as honestly earlier today, I started reading another book that Mario recommended called The Body Keeps Score, which I'm about 70 pages in, and I'm digging it so far. But I was sitting, not to be like, oh, hey, look at me, but I'm really, really lucky. I live in Italy. It's amazing, right? If you've never been, you got to check it out. The natural splendor is ridiculous around here. Absolutely insane. I drove 5 or 10 minutes to a local park. I hiked up a trail for about 10 minutes. I brought a little small camp chair. I had climbed down the side of an embankment and sat next to like this little mini set of rapids and just read for like an hour, and it was incredible. And I don't take any of that for granted. It's absolutely insane. I don't know what I'm going to do when I have to move. I'm going to have to find something else to replace it. And I'm sure there's other awesome things out there. I know there is. I had a ton in Pennsylvania, New Jersey when I was with Mario McGuire. But all that to say, one of the things that it came up in this book and then also had me thinking is talking about grounding techniques, which is something we've talked about before, and trauma processing, and thinking about, and again, this is from my skewed perspective of growing up somewhere where I had a barn in front of my high school and we had to chase deer and geese off of our practice football field, so definitely country. Maybe my perspective is skewed. However, I feel for me, and I would wager to guess most people, maybe not everybody, but most people, it's a lot easier to find some groundedness and process trauma somewhere without all the man-made distraction. I know for a fact, for me, absolutely, it is way easier for me to think about a traumatic experience or something like that when I'm somewhere surrounded by nature, like sitting next to a waterfall somewhere, or a river or a creek, or on top of a mountain with like a view for 10 miles. I can think about those things and have that view in front of me, and I feel like my lizard brain doesn't kick in right away, or there's almost no chance I'm going to relive or have any of the physiological activations, because it's so much easier to realize like that memory is not now this that's surrounding me. Because like when you think about it, and specifically, so tons of sources of trauma out there for sure. Something I was just thinking about anecdotally, and I don't want to try to make some crazy wild claim, but I feel like a lot of them, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are man-made sources of trauma, right? War is a man-made source of trauma, right? A car accident is a man-made source of trauma. There are others that are absolutely like getting mauled by a bear. Hey, that's pretty natural, right? But a lot of these have to do with like a man-made setting, and I wonder if there's anything to that. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think there is some correlation between, if we're talking specifically about a trauma, whatever it was, a powerful moment. I would say if a highly positive or highly negative event happened out in nature, that the sights, sounds, smells that were associated and going on and observed at that time, which may not be on the individual's conscious. They may not be aware of it consciously, but subconsciously, they're probably aware of it. Once that happens, I think there's that moment has more of an impact and has a stronger lasting memory on an individual. Yeah. What you got? Ryan.
Oh, geez, I was waiting for I was in no hurry.
No, go ahead.
My question would be, are you asking if people have more trauma because of man-made fixtures, cities and stuff like that? Is that more along the lines of what you were saying, Brad?
Not necessarily like cities per se, but if I think about my personal trauma, so this is my personal, view is, war is not nature. Like I get it that man is naturally violent, but I don't go out and hike on a trail and get blown up by an IED, right? That's a human thing.
So do you relate trauma as part of suffering though? I mean, do you equate those two words as being the same?
That's a great question. I would say the way I would define trauma, I haven't really thought about suffering as much, but I would say trauma is just an experience that, shatters and shapes you and changes everything about how you view the world. To me, that sounds like suffering would be a part of that.
Weber, what do you got? You got something to add?
Yeah, going back to take a few steps back. Sorry, Brad was talking about going out in nature and be by a stream or on the side of a mountain or something like that. I think that when people are struggling, or you can say, if I'm struggling, if I'm having some difficulties with problems or something like that, that's like the biggest thing. It's kind of like, it's always like right here, you're just experiencing it over and over again if you can't figure out how to manage it, or if you can't figure out how to deal with it. So it's this big, huge thing, like right in your face, whatever it is. And I think if you get out into nature, it kind of makes you feel small, Brad being in the position that he's at, going out to be able on the side of the mountain. It's like, wow, this is huge. The world is a huge place, and I'm such a very small thing, and I'm one person with my own problems in it. It doesn't make anything go away, but it takes that thing that's like right here in front of your face, and it just it doesn't get rid of it. But I think for me, it definitely does allow a different perspective. Being in nature sometimes can make you feel small, comparatively, not value-wise, just smaller in the grand scheme of everything.
Smaller scope, smaller lens, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is one thing that is beneficial. And then I think to the question that you had asked, you mentioned trauma and suffering. This takes a lot of practice, but I think a lot of people experience trauma, and it's not always easy to deal with. But sometimes, given the right information and the right practice and the right support, suffering can be completely up to you. Sorry, what is that? And I'm talking from, I guess, from an experience that Mario we had with the post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And I know we always go back to this, but Viktor Frankl's quote, choosing one's attitude. It's completely up to us. But I will say that I'm guilty of it across the board, definitely.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. Jerbo, I'm going to throw the mic to you here in a second. I just want to add just one quick little thing. Brian mentioned something about trauma versus suffering. from my standpoint, I view similarly, kind of a combination of everybody. I think suffering is inevitable. I think suffering for every person is a thing. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I think that suffering is viewed the same way as beauty, and that's in the eye of the beholder. I do not believe that there is any concrete metric of relating trauma. It is legitimately within the person and how they have perceived a important moment or series of moments throughout their life, and how their behaviors have reacted to those moments, if you will. So that's all I wanted to add on the difference between the two. But I don't think anybody can get away from suffering. It's just how to not let it take away from you, and not just how to survive, but how to actually use that and get better, if that makes sense. So, Gerbo, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah. So sometimes, suffering, we talk about that, and then nature, correlating those two to me. Let's say you're just having a great day, everything's fine, and you hear a song, or you see something or hear something that reminds you of a really traumatic event for you. Now, it's very natural for people to just go back to that feeling and relive it and entertain it and almost sit in it and just kind of, let it absorb us. And it can be very destructive too, to relive those traumatic experiences in your head. Nothing is happening again. It's just your mind, your self-talk is making that come up. So when Webb said, being out in nature makes us feel small, that's what I take from that is being out in nature makes us more present in the moment. Like, this is a moment that you're living right now. What happened to you 5 years ago or 10 years ago is still relevant to you, but do you have to experience it every 5 seconds? No. So how do we do that? How do we create an environment for ourselves that lets us be today's Webb or today's Jerbo or Brian, and being in nature, even for a little bit, I think helps that. It lets us be present in the moment, to smell rotting leaves in a pile of mud, to hear a dog bark in the distance, to feel the cold on your hands, and think about gloves now. And, like, is it going to snow? Is that just mist? What is that? And like, that's the being in the present that I wish we could all somehow harness without having to be in nature all the time. Can we just do that, every day? So that's kind of where I was going with all that stuff. So thank you for letting me share that.